The food choices we make ourselves not only impact our own health, although first and foremost, we must take that into account, they also impact others. And by others, I mean humans and non-humans and the broader environment.
Welcome back to 40-Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by James Collier, a registered nutritionist and co-founder of Huel, as well as being an author of his brand new book, Well Fed. Following several years of working as a nutritionist and NHS dietitian, James co-founded the popular consumer brand Huel in 2014, a brand I'm sure you are all very much aware of. Huel is on a mission to make food options healthy, accessible, and affordable. And in the last 10 years, James and the team have sold over 400 million meals across 80 countries and have grown to a team of over 330 people across 6 offices. That is incredibly impressive. I can't wait to dive into James's journey with Huel to date, share some of his nutrition advice with you all, and hear more about his book, which explores contemplative nutrition, a dietary philosophy that encourages you to pause and reflect on what you eat. So, James, a big warm welcome to 40-Minute Mentor. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm all right, James. Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
The pleasure is all mine. Well, we're going to talk about your new book and all about the amazing journey you've been on with Huel. But before we do that, we'll warm you up with a few quick-fire questions just to get you going and so our audience can get to know you a bit better. So please finish the following sentences after me. The moment that defined my career was when?
I graduated.
Okay, good. That's a good answer. My biggest failure to date is?
Oh, I don't like that question. We said quick fire. I'm not doing very quick here, am I? I'm boring your audience already with it.
It's okay.
I don't like to frame things as failures. We learn from our mistakes. I'm sure I've made many faux pas along my metaphorical journey, but I won't like to think of them as failures.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be politically avoid that question.
No, I think that's fair enough. I think failures, you learn from every mistake along the way. That's a good way of looking at it. A skill I wish I had mastered earlier is?
The ability to delegate.
A classic one for entrepreneurial people, I think. And I think I agree with that. And I'm sure lots of people listening will too. And a life lesson I keep coming back to is?
Care about what other people think, but care a little bit less than you think you need to.
Wise words. I like that a lot. As someone that's a bit of a people pleaser,
yes.
I think that's a really important advice.
Yeah, you hear these people sort of say, have a careless attitude. I don't agree with that. That's not helpful at all. But you can care too much, especially what other people think about you, and it can hold you back.
Yeah, so true. Well, thank you very much. Well, we've warmed you up nicely there, and we're going to dive into all things Huel. But before we do that, I always like to start at the beginning and understand a bit about our guests' upbringing, and I guess for you particularly, where your original interest in nutrition came from. So if you don't mind sharing, we'd love to learn more.
Yeah, sure. I've spoken about this before. So I kind of put my reason for going down the nutrition route to 2 main reasons. One is when I was 8 years old, my mum was diagnosed with what I later found out to be terminal breast cancer. That was the first time I'd heard the C word at 8. And I didn't know at that time that the prognosis wasn't very good. But she actually survived 11 years. And she saw me go to university and she passed away when I was in my first year at uni. So the relevance of that is this was the 80s. Medical advances wasn't anywhere near advanced as they are now, but it was still pretty good. And for sure, what the NHS did was save her life. But she also, after the initial operations, she's decided to change her lifestyle, became a lot more mindful. We didn't call it mindfulness back then, but we know what it was now. But also changed the way that she ate. She followed a vegetarian diet and took quite a few supplements, the sort of things I kind of fight against now, but nevertheless, ate very good quality food. There was a lot of home cooked foods. Dad and me, we didn't go vegetarian, but we did have a plant-rich diet by default, which I now know to be a good thing. So there was a lot of talk about nutrition around the dinner table and just generally and health. So that for sure led me down the route. The other one was I was bullied as a kid. I'm sure most guys will say they were bullied, but it certainly affected me quite deeply and profoundly. And I didn't want to be the wimpy guy. And when I was 16, I found solace in the gym. And then, I started lifting heavy things and putting them down again, and decided I wanted to do whatever I can to get bigger muscles, and knowledge is power. So the saying goes. So when it was time to decide what to go and study at uni, I could have done economics, the rational thing, or I could have done the passion thing, nutrition. I went with passion. And fast forward 25 years, it turned out to probably be the rational thing to do. So I went there, wanted to learn about nutrition more generally, and that took me down that route.
Wow, what an amazing story. And clearly has been a hugely successful career choice. And I know you spent decades working as an NHS dietitian and nutrition consultant. So would love to hear about some of those biggest career lessons you learned during that time working in the NHS, and anything that I guess you've used in your subsequent career.
Yeah. So the natural thing for people to do a nutrition and dietetics degree, which is what I did, was to go and work in the NHS. It was, these days, the opportunities outside of the NHS were a lot greater, thankful, but it was more or less like 98% or whatever, and I'm making that figure up, but it seemed to be around that. So a bit of people went into the NHS. I kind of knew it wasn't for me permanently from day one, but I also knew that it was probably a good thing to do. I'd done my year's training as part of my degree. I thought I should do so. Worked in a couple of hospitals, and the total was 7 years. The latter years had a very good boss there, and I was part-time while I set up my freelance consultancy. And this was, so we're talking 99, 2000 then. So the internet was a thing, but it wasn't much of a thing. And I was mostly traveling to see people to give advice. And I live in rural Northamptonshire, and it was just not effective. So the clients were here and there. Then I started doing online diet advice, possibly before anyone else had thought of that thing, 2000, latter 2000. I also set up a bodybuilding and fitness discussion forum called muscletalk.co.uk with a business partner. And that went okay, actually. It went really quite well. We got it at the right time before social media, when other forums weren't doing so well. We got momentum, and we were once on the biggest fitness site in Europe, and we were funded by advertising revenue and selling a few e-services, etc. So I was doing that and my consulting. I was also actually working on the doors at that time as well as a bouncer, and which wasn't good for my mental health. We can come back to that if you want later on, because it kind of bridged the gap while I was trying to get rid of my NHS work and start doing the consulting. And so NHS don't pay very well anyway, so I was supplementing it there. And when I wanted to reduce my hours and go freelance and get Muscle Talk going, I had an income stream. So I was always okay for money, although I was working quite long hours. And then that grew. Muscle Talk ticked over for many years. I did a load of other stuff in the bodybuilding and fitness world as well, like a gym clothing company. Show promotion was the other big thing. That was just mentally draining and not lucrative at all. Had a physical shop, as well as an online shop as part of Muscle Talk. And it was a lot of, I was a busy fool, maybe. The Muscle Talk did well. The consultancy always ticked along. All the other ventures really were just not a good use of my time and mental capacity. Fast forward to June 2014, I was always doing different consulting projects. It wasn't just seeing clients, it was also speaking, writing, product development. And I got an email from Julian Hearn, who's the principal founder of Huel, with this great idea he had. We worked together for a year and launched in June 2015, where Julian's the principal founder and I'm co-founder. And it sort of took off from there. So that's kind of the background.
Wow, interesting. I guess Huel was a huge success, and everyone, I'm pretty sure all of our listeners will be very much aware of it. But I'd love to hear a bit more about that genesis story. Where did the idea come from? And I guess for anyone that hasn't heard the business, it'd be great to just hear in your own words, what it's all about, who's it for.
So it's Huel, we make nutritionally complete food. So these are meals in a powder, liquid, or grain or pasta based format that's got all the nutrition you need in a convenient form. Now, the original product was the powder. The ready to drinks, the bottles that most people see in all the shops up and down the UK and beyond, probably our most well known products. And we have others in the range as well. So they are convenient food. Everything's plant based, everything's suitable for vegans. So we've got low environmental impact, but highly nutritious. Therefore, the circumstances where people are otherwise making poor nutrition choices, we offer a better alternative that addresses a lot of the problems that people are facing. And that's Julian's idea. So he is fundamentally the entrepreneur here. I know this is a platform for entrepreneurs, and so I will always argue that I'm not one, and we can have that argument in a minute, because I know you're probably going to say I am. And I have a habit with a lot of podcast hosts. He is very much the entrepreneur. It was his idea, born out of, he'd already made some money, and then he was trying another venture which had evolved sort of trying different diets and comparing them. And he found it quite challenging time-wise to make food, apart from protein shakes. So Julian thought, well, how can we put everything into a shake? He looked for some nutritionists and found me, and that's how it was born. So it was his idea, his initial investment, my initial recipe. And we worked then with a co-packer to get it off, and we've expanded since.
Okay. So tell us a bit about those early scrappy days for you and Julian. What was the point where you realized you're really onto something, and how was that first year like? Because it must have been a real risk for you to kind of go all in on something like that.
Yeah, so I was still doing my other projects. So I wasn't really full time on Huel early on because I still had my other things. Didn't know what was going to go on. Julian it was all he was doing. A couple of people joined we started in June, I think early autumn. We had the first employee, and then by Christmas there was the four of us went out for Christmas dinner. I remember that, and I was still working from home. And Huel back then was based in Aylesbury. It's in Tring now, which is a few miles from Aylesbury. But I live in Corby, Northamptonshire, and so I've been working from home back then, and I went in. I was doing all the nutrition stuff and helping out on other stuff where I could. But it was very scrappy. An example of that is early on, Julian. It took off quite quickly, and Julian and then the girl that was helping him were packing parcels, and that's all they were doing from morning till night because sales were going. And how can you build a business? So Julian called me up and said, "Damn talks, James, forget anything nutrition, find me a fulfillment house." So I spent the next couple of days on the phone called find fulfillment houses. And then I could be wrong, but let's say it was a Wednesday. On Friday, I was visiting one. And by a week later, we had a contract. So then, we could start getting ingredients over there, and we'll start getting product over there and getting them fulfilling for us and growing there. So that's an example of the scrappiness. Like, you need to solve the immediate problem in order to free yourself up, in order to do all the good stuff. That took me out of my comfort zone, right? I'm a nutrition guy, and it was hustle in that.
Yeah, and I guess therein lies the beauty of startups. In many ways, it's all hands to the deck. You often learn and are exposed to different things, and you're constantly out of your comfort zone. And I guess that's not for everyone, but for many people, that's really exciting and a chance to learn new skills or get new exposure. I guess do you mind explaining, I guess, how your role has evolved? So you originally came up with the original product in terms of the nutritional side of things. How has your role evolved over the years as the business has grown?
Yeah, a lot really. And this will feed in probably to when we talk about the book actually quite nicely. So I'm a human nutrition background and dietetics. So very much I've got the clinical background, I've got the sports and fitness background and general health. Product development was then coming on. And then I was learning commercialism. So I'm a human nutritionist, and I played around with the production of the first formulas, but soon we needed NPD, new product development. We needed people who make the stuff taste nicer, and the technical team who improve the consistency and the other organoleptic qualities. By the term organoleptic, I mean like taste, flavor, smell, everything like that, and texture. So we needed to improve that. So we brought in people for them. But also, because we're a plant-based, we started to look at our environmental credentials and found actually we're really quite good. So we started talking about them more. I've always been a bit of a science nerd. So I started looking at the impact of the food system on greenhouse gas emissions, land use, water use, and other broader environmental considerations. So I sort of forced me to examine my own behavior of the way I eat personally, which we can come on to, but also what we were doing in the business. So we were all doing a bit of everything back then. And I was dealing with, if a nutrition related customer inquiry came in, I'd be writing the reply, sometimes directly. I was writing articles, but then over time, we took on other nutritionists as the business grew. And now we've got a department with 6 registered nutritionists or registered dietitians, one of whom is in the US. I'm also really proud. I think this makes us stand out against other food companies. We're not even 10 years old yet. We've got 350-ish people. And it's not just those 6 of us who are formally qualified and experienced in nutrition. And there's a lot of pseudo nutritionists out there, and we've all got one of the 2 formally recognized titles. But we've also got people in the business, in the product development team, in the technical team, and even in some cases in the marketing team, who have done nutrition or food science degrees. And I know we need to recount the figure, but a while ago, there was 18 people across the business who have got a nutrition and food science background. And out of and this was fewer than 350 then, but out of that many people, I think that's really cool, because it just shows to demonstrate how seriously we take this. So I learned as the nutrition team grew, I was doing less sort of the hands-on stuff myself, but even until a couple of years ago, I was still doing a lot of the nutrition side of the product development, which is based on a spreadsheet, working out what people need. It's quite complicated actually, but it can be learned if you've got the skills to learn. What I want to focus more on, to answer your question, James, is the ESG side and sustainability, ESG more broadly, which is environmental social governance for people listening who may not have heard the term. That sort of became under my remit in the business. Now, I'm not an expert in the sustainability side, and we had two people in the business who sort of champion that, but in my team, so we call the team the Sustainable Nutrition Team. There's 8 people there, including me, who cover both sides. And I think that's really important because knowing what I know now about nutrition, the food choices we make ourselves not only impact our own health, although first and foremost, we must take that into account, they also impact others. And by others, I mean humans and non-humans and the broader environment. So I think it's really cool that we do that. So I'm Chief Sustainable Nutrition Officer by title. I'm on the senior management team. I used to be on the board. I'm not anymore. A couple of years ago, I came off because it was a bit boring, really. It was a bit more of the financial stuff. And, if I'm needed, then I get called on. And so I'm on the management team. I still run that whole part of the business, the sustainable nutrition side of the business. And that's really cool because it's what I enjoy. I'm now kind of part-time. I'm not set days, but I kind of do the equivalent of maybe 3-ish days. But I dip in and out of doing things, and I wear 2 hats. And my other career hat is what I call being a nutrition communicator, because I can't think of a better term. The term influencer doesn't quite work, and also I didn't really want to be one of them. And it involves me writing about nutrition, talking on podcasts, doing public speaking events, doing the social media thing where I stand in the kitchen on my phone and talk to myself, and anything like that that's disseminating information. I write articles on Substack, which it's free for people to read and get my ideas. So that's what I'm doing. But they both massively overlap, right? If I'm talking to you today, have I got my nutrition communicator hat on, or have I got my Huel hat on? Well, I've kind of got both on, right? I do this because it fulfills me. I've got job security, so I can kind of do these things that fulfill me more. And it led me to, change my own eating habits, which we can talk about, and then go on to write the book.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we're going to come on to the book shortly, but thank you for sharing that. And it's wonderful how your role has evolved, but you've also stayed so close to the thing that you are most passionate about, and the impact of that, I guess, has exponentially grown as a result. I know that in 2016 things really started to ramp up in scale at Huel. I think your health also took a hit at that time, which is a familiar tale for founders. It's so intense, and often health does become impacted by that. And I think a lot of people listening to this will be able to relate. So do you mind sharing a bit about your story and what helped you get through it? And I'd be particularly interested in your advice for anyone else that might be in that phase at the moment, sort of being impacted by startup life.
So health, that was in 2016. So we'd been going for just over a year. I was still doing some of my other things, some of the show promotions, and I was too much going on. What I had was an infection on my spine. Doctor said it was idiopathic, so meaning they don't know how it was caused, but it was I likely had a viral infection on my respiratory system because I did predated that. I had for several weeks. I was snotty and coughing and everything like that. Not great. And I probably had a concurrent bacterial infection that got in when my immune system was dealing with the virus side. If that makes sense. That appears to be the most reasonable explanation. And so was that being busy? Probably, because if you run down because your immune system's not great. But look, I was conservatively treated, but I was hospitalized for 3 weeks. I was housebound for a few months. And it's the only time since I was 16 years old that I've taken any decent time off the gym. And I lost 3 stone of muscle, basically, which when you've got body dysmorphia issues as a bodybuilder for that length of time, that messes with your mind, although it kind of was the last thing on my mind for a period of that. But I want to be clear, there's no one, anyone thinking this is a woe story. It absolutely wasn't. I had a clinical mind from my days, and within the week before I went into hospital, that was the bad bit because I was in a lot of pain and I was given very bad advice from primary care. But when I did get into hospital, really from a couple of days in, I knew the prognosis was excellent. I knew it was going to be at a time, but I knew the prognosis was great, and I just needed to be treated with drugs and just take it easy. So that's quite positive, if that makes sense. But I was on a lot of painkillers for a lot of time, which, I remember thinking, I can see why people get addicted to this stuff. It's quite nice in some respects when I overdid the Oromorph. And then I came out of that and I had a few mental health issues, partly because although I'd been checking my emails regularly, apart from 1 week where I was really too ill, I kind of lost the momentum of Huel for a bit. And Huel had really taken off in that period massively. And I was playing catch up. I couldn't go in because even when I was better, I was very limited mobility for 5 months. So I couldn't go in for a long time. And yeah. And so, I kind of the following year, I got quite a big depression, but it's not the first depression I've had, but it was quite a hard one, and multiple reasons. Maybe it was the rebound off the opioids and the gabapentin, etc., or it was multiple factors. But I got over that and got a number of strategies to deal with mental health, and that's the last bout of depression I've ever had. And I can, as confident as anyone can ever be, whatever say, that will be the last one I'll ever have. Of course, you don't know. And I'm sure we'll have bad days and bad periods in my life, but it never will clinical depression adversely affect my life in any significant form. That's what I'm trying to say there.
Can I ask how you do deal with that sort of thing for anyone that may be struggling, listening to this, perhaps burning the candle at both ends? It's all getting a bit too much, maybe depressed, which we see in a lot of entrepreneurial people. Is there any coping mechanisms or things that have helped you over the last few years since that period of your life?
Yeah, well, I've always had the gym anyway, and that was good, right? That's always been a bit of even before then, before I found these strategies, when I had depression issues years ago, when I had a workout, I was always pretty good at going to the gym. I've never been one of those that hasn't gone. You might miss the odd day, but I've always been pretty, even if you're feeling crap, you go. And I always come back from the gym being a little bit better or a little bit less crap, let's say, so that was always good. But more recently, I come from a science perspective, and I used things like meditation. I used to like poo-poo, think it was new age hippie crap. And then, but there's some scientific communicators that I kind of really respect were talking about it. I thought, well, why would they be talking about that if it was rubbish, right? These guys are good, right? And I'm talking about like Yuval Noah Harari and Sam Harris. People may be familiar with those names. And so I looked at the research and thought, actually, pretty good research here. So I thought, I'll try it. And I kind of got it. And I'm like, okay. So mindfulness is one thing. Now, I've got a little bit cavalier about formal 10 minutes a day in latter years, but I'm very good at taking mindful moments during the day, like multiple every day, just like pausing for 2 or 3 seconds and just grounding myself. The other thing is it's just accepting gratitude, because we should be grateful that we're very privileged, and it's just pausing sometimes. Now, I want to be clear. I still get blue days. I mean, I had a bit of a wobble a couple of weeks ago, but it's just more mildly frustrating rather than anything significant. And then, of course, nutrition. But I've always had a good diet. Was I having a good diet back then? I know what a good diet was, but if I'm going to be constantly critical to myself, I was probably eating junk because I was busy, even though I had a convenient food option to hand. I should know better, but you sometimes just don't. You get a dopamine rush from craving the food and fulfilling it. And maybe that wasn't helping me as much as well. But, now obviously my diet's really good and I exercise a lot and I've got meditation, mindfulness, but also just try and view everything in life through that science lens, just trying to be just critically thinking everything and just, not getting pulled in by any ideologies, or trying not to. Maybe I fail, but just being, if you hear something bad, is it really? What's the evidence behind that? And you can use the skills I learned from nutrition science. I can manifest, at least to some degree, in life more broadly, which is partly what frustrates me about everything that's going on at the moment with the polarization of the world and the rise of populism. It's everything I'm trying to fight against. So I find it more depressing now, although I have the skills to not get pulled in, or at least I think I do. I see it more depressing because I see so many people getting pulled into this pit via social media.
It's so true. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really important to talk about these things. And I think that will no doubt help anyone that might be struggling a bit at the moment. There are tools and things you can do to pull yourself out of those harder times. And I think the more we do talk about it, and, which we thankfully do now, I think the better for everyone. This episode is sponsored by Capsule, the certified B Corp redefining insurance for high growth scaling businesses. As a neo broker powered by cutting edge API technology, Capsule streamline the insurance process, removing manual hassle and delivering tailored solutions that evolve with your business. They support ambitious companies across fast paced, innovative sectors such as fintech, health tech, SaaS, and sustainability, including clients like Bloom and Wild, Moneybox, Castor, and What Three Words. If you're a venture backed startup looking to outsource the buying and management of your insurance, find out more on www.capsulecover.com. Now, back to today's 40-Minute Mentor. We've got to come on to talk about your book, which is called Well Fed. And tell us about the book. Tell us where the idea came from and what it's all about, if you don't mind.
Back in 2019, I decided to change the way I ate. I'd always eaten pretty good, but based on my own health and probably muscle building. But as I learned due to Huel, 100% due to Huel, as I learned more about sustainable foods, I looked at the impact of what we eat on the environment. So I decided to reduce the amount of animal-derived ingredients that I have. So I sort of limited to about 10% of my calories coming from animals over the course of, say, a week. Now, for perspective, the Western average is 28 to 30%. So I'm cutting it by 2/3. So what that would look like would be having a couple of days a week where you're almost devoid of animal produce, and other times beefing up your proteins with plant proteins. I'm not fully convinced by the vegan argument, which we can discuss in a moment, and I have a big wrestle with that in the book. But also, as I was learning about sustainable food systems, I was looking at the ethical side of intensive farming and on the animal perspective. And I started to question that. Now, the term ethics is subjective. What you deem as ethical, I might have a different opinion on. But I do think, broadly speaking, most of us in the UK or the West more broadly have a similar stance, although it might not be perfect. And what I've defined in the book, or what I'd call my ethical stance. However, so they were the sort of three things that I did in my diet: eating for my own health, sustainable nutrition, and considering ethics. Pandemic came, we all got a little bit bored. I decided to write a few articles and essays, and some of which were based on this type of eating. I thought, share this. What am I going to call it? And it immediately came to mind, well, I'm thinking about what I'm eating. Let's call it contemplative eating. So I did that. Then as I was writing the articles, I thought, nah, this isn't articles. This is a book. It had the 3 pillars. And I thought, okay, so in February 2021, I started writing the book. Back then, wasn't called Well Fed then. And I thought there's 4 pillars. I thought we need to split out how what we eat affects our physical health and what we eat affects our mental health, and then sustainability and ethics. Started writing the book, and about a quarter of the way, and I thought, nah, there's not 4 pillars, there's 5 pillars. I thought it's not just what we eat, but it's how we eat and who we eat with. Concept of meals, right? Why do we have meals? Let's look at that. Let's look at the science behind it. So that's the 5th pillar, and there's a chapter for each of them in part 2. There's part 1 is like identifying the issue and talking about misinformation and also cravings and stuff. Part 2 is the 5 pillars. And part 3 is sort of moving forward, how we can make better food choices and a few broader issues in the food system. But the 5th pillar on community and social eating is all about looking at the science behind why it's good to share food. Obviously, we make better food choices by preparing food for other people, but there's actual direct benefits from things like behavioral synchrony, which is shown that certain neurotransmitters and hormones are associated with positive well-being, like serotonin and oxytocin, for instance, are released when we eat in the company of others. Okay, that's really interesting, isn't it? So there's certain things I look at in there and discuss more in depth. And now your more astute listeners will be thinking, hey, isn't this the Huel guy? Isn't that not meals that you share with people? Well, yeah. What we've done at Huel is try to address the problem of people making otherwise bad food choices. Now, if somebody is able to prepare their food, source their food from really good ingredients and prepare food, has got the skills and is able to share it with other people, then that's not a meal you should be having Huel at. But how many people do that 3 times a day? I mean, how many people do it at all, right? They don't. So we're moving forward. So while I want to encourage people to 2 or 3 times a week share a meal with other people, I think that's a really big thing. And if you're at work, I mean, a lot of your audience will be people who are working, right? Yeah, of course I want people to have Huel, but if they're having made bad food choices, but if you can sit down for half an hour, 40 minutes, listening to a podcast or along with a friend or a colleague, then do that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think so many of my happiest memories are connecting with others, with friends, with family over a meal. I mean, it brings a lot of joy. So that makes Total sense. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, well, I thought I wanted to get my ideas onto paper. Now, the reason why I write is it's a mess up there, what's going on. And I was learning more about stuff. I needed to make sense of it. So when I write, it helps me form my opinions. But writing isn't good enough. You have to commit to publishing. Because if you're publishing, it forces you to be rigorous. It forces you to humility and be honest. If you value those values, because people are going to criticize what you say. So in the short term, I write the Substack articles, the blog on Substack, which anyone can read for free. And then obviously the book. And I finished the book. Well, I thought I'd finished the book in summer of 22, so 15 months. And then I tried to get a publisher and it was a nightmare. I played around and redid a few bits. And it wasn't until May last year, 2024, that I got the HarperCollins deal. And then it was all systems go because my editor, brilliant, it was brilliant. Basically, I had the pre-call when they took me on as a contract, told me how great I was, went down to the head offices in London. She printed off a manuscript and put big red marks through 3 chapters. And you know, when you were at school and you were told you were the A-star student and you come out of a parents' evening with a B- could do better, that was the feeling I had. So, but you know what? She was right. It's not that those chapters were poor, they were off topic. So I was forced to rewrite a load. So summer, bye summer. And it was, I had my Huel work, I had this, and I'm laying it on a bit thick really, but I did have good holidays, but when I wasn't on holiday, I was working 12 hours a day, really, whether it be Huel or writing. And that was intense, but it was for the greater good because I got a better book for it. And HarperCollins have been absolutely excellent. I was told by other authors, you'll get minimal support from your publishers. But that's not been my experience. My experience has been some brilliant people who have backed me so much.
Love it. So what do you want the readers of this book to really take away from it?
So the end of each of those 5 pillars have some considerations. Although I'm talking about the food system, I'm talking about it of what people can learn and change themselves. So it's not a diet book. It is a food theory book, but it's a food theory book with actionable takeaways. So there are a lot throughout the book, not just on those 5 chapters. I talk about misinformation as well, for instance. And there's people who watch a lot of podcasts or social media will find it very confusing. But there's some key points to how people can get through that. And I summarize everything in the final chapter as the 20 actionable takeaways, which kind of consolidated them into the main ones. And I want people to take away those things. So there are things like eat more fiber with examples, have more omega-3s, but also share meals. I've talked about the sustainable side of things like minimize food waste. There's always, just tell people to do that. People can learn how to do that. But if there's one central thing I want people to take, I'm hoping there is a lot more than one thing. But if people come away acknowledging the fact that the food system is complex, but our food choices needn't be complicated. And I'm using the 2 words, the complex, as embrace complexity in the food system. If they just acknowledge that it is that one thing, it's going to cut through the noise from anybody who's giving you advice in a very black and white, absolutist way. If you're listening to a communicator who's very nuanced, non-committal, very unsure of themselves, but very confidently unconfident, they're likely to be someone worth listening to, which goes counter to what we think. The people who are talking in black and whites are probably talking crap. So if people can take away from the book that the food system is complex, but what we eat needn't be complicated. And a phrase I use in the book is nutrition science isn't rocket science, because there might be a lot of noise and people like me need to learn a lot, and it needs to be complicated for people like me, but it doesn't need to be complicated for most people. We all know what we should and should be eating. We know that McDonald's every night of the week is probably not ideal, but once a week might be okay. We know we should be having more fibrous foods and things like that. So pay attention to the basic rules and you won't go far wrong.
That's great. And what are the golden rules that you live by when it comes to what you eat, how you exercise, and what advice do you have for people listening to this going, this all makes sense, but I'm really struggling to stick to those good habits?
Okay. Well, first, the golden rule is don't make too many habits in one go. You're setting yourself up to failure. New Year's people, this is the big one. I'm going to go on this diet. I'm going to dry January. I'm going to go down the gym X amount of times. I'm going to meditate. Well, you set yourself up to fail. You just absolutely set yourself up to fail. We've all done it, right? I started this thing on social media and literally nobody's following it, but because I haven't got a big reach, but one new habit a month for 2025. We're March now. It's not too late. Just start one new habit. That could be going to the gym 3 times a week. But it becomes routine if you do it If you do these things one at a time, they become your norm and they're quite easy. How hard is it for people who's having a crap lifestyle to go to the gym 40 minutes, 3 times a week? It's really quite easy. But if you're doing that, you're having a structured meal plan, you plan your shopping, you've got to meditate 10 minutes a day, all at the same time, you're just not going to do it. But then when the going to the gym 3 times a week becomes a habit, then maybe you could start, I'm going to start meditating for 10 minutes, 3 times a week as well. That's not so hard because your norm is the gym. Adding the meditation is the difficult thing. And then you can do other things. Then you can maybe plan your meals. So my key takeaway is don't set yourself up to fail. Do things one at a time. And, you know, at the end, people do this January thing. At the end of the year, they're doing no changes from the year before. But if you've got one change that you've managed to achieve throughout the year that you weren't doing in 2024, you've completed in 2025, that's a massive win. And exercise, when it comes to predicting health, exercise is more important than the food choices. Eating too many calories, as in energy toxicity, calorie toxicity, is related to obesity. That's an issue for sure. But if you're physically active, it's the bigger predictor of living well and living well older.
Yeah, it's really important. So thank you for sharing that. And are there, in terms of balancing, having a balanced diet and eating the right sorts of things, for you as somebody that knows more than most about this topic, what do you typically eat on a weekly basis? And we really want to make sure people listen to this and take something, okay, right, I'm going to inspire to go out and cook and eat better. Are there particular things you think we should all be thinking about?
We should all be thinking about fiber. Fiber is massively underrated. So I'll tell you something. I'm coming from the gym scene for most of my life, all my adult life. People are going down there talking about protein this, protein that. You had your protein powder. How much protein do you have a day? I'll tell you something that never happens. No gym bro ever goes down there while they're lifting, like, or while they're benching 300 pounds, go, hey, how much fiber have you had? Just never happens, right? It's just not seen as macho. Why not? Fiber's linked to good health, good performance, for healthy microbiome, mental health and cognition, for reasons that we haven't got time to go into. But it's just not sexy enough. It's just not macho enough. But fiber is important. So I do emphasize fiber through just eating a plant-rich diet, plenty of fruit and veg and whole grains. We know that whole grains are rich in the Mediterranean diet. We know that sort of style of eating is a good predictor of eating well. So fiber, protein, probably overemphasize protein a bit, but protein is important. It's more satiating. It's more thermogenic. So I think it's very brief. There's something called caloric availability. The amount of calories that our bodies actually get from protein is less than the other macronutrients. So it means we can have a little bit more food for what we get. So it's really good. But eat a range of different fruit and veg as well. Omega-3s, don't overlook them. Now, they can come from oily fish, but you can also get them from supplements, especially algae-derived ones, if environmental concerns or ethical concerns which are very valid, are a key point. But the bigger one, I will say, is just be mindful who you listen to, because it's going to, if you're confused about misinformation, that's going to cause you mental anxiety. And it's unnecessary, right?
It's so true. And that's actually a great segue. I wanted to ask you, there's so much information out there, so many so-called experts, and obviously there are really credible experts like yourself, and it can be a bit overwhelming and you don't know who to trust or what to believe in. So, and often there's a lot of talk about different types of diets. And are there any myths that you want to bust for our listeners on that topic, particularly when it comes to things like diets? Because I think while we have an expert with us now, it will hopefully help.
Yeah. There are no absolutes, right? Anybody who says this way of eating is the right way. And from some level, I can get this. And there's a lot more cultural and social reasons for this that we haven't got time to go into. But very briefly, you probably get it right. You've got maybe someone who's been successful in business, they've got overweight, they've been eating crap food. Then they come across a social media influencer who's in good shape, feeling great, but they're following, say, the carnivore diet, for example, but they're also exercising a lot. So this individual starts training a lot. They're quite a motivated personality because they're a business leader. They're probably going to have that positive, mindset. I'm going to do this. And they suddenly start feeling really good by following this carnivore diet. And they put it all down to the carnivore diet, and they lose weight and they get in shape and they feel great. They want to tell everybody about it. Why not? Because this has worked for me. Surely it's got to work for everyone else. And I'm not doubting it hasn't worked for them. Now, there's two things. One is I question whether any other healthy lifestyle change would have given them the same beneficial effects, more than likely, especially if they're exercising. But also, human beings are complex. We have so many different processes going on that function differently. We've been brought up differently. We've got different DNA. We've got different epigenetics. We have socially, what we eat is linked. It's got many social considerations. The word culture actually comes from the way we eat, and we use the word more broadly. So we're individuals. So what works for one might not work for another. Why do some people can go hardcore vegan and they feel great, and someone else, even if they follow a structured plan on a vegan diet, just don't feel well at all? And we've got to bear this in mind. So diet becomes ideological. And a term that I invent in the book, Well Fed, is dietology, which is a portmanteau of diet and ideology. You see people with their social media handles like James the Carnivore or John the Vegan or something like that. And it just shows a dogmatic commitment to their way of eating. I kind of get it because, like I said, we haven't got time to talk about this, but there are many cultural reasons why we eat in a certain way, and we should acknowledge that. But just be mindful that people are different. And so if people are hearing somebody who's very black and white and they're thinking this is the only way to eat and avoid ultra processed food, everyone's saying as well, well, for a start, even junk ultra processed foods, there's no need to avoid them. You'd be wise to cut well down, but foods shouldn't be thought of as good or bad. Diets can be good or bad, as in your way of eating. So if you have salmon salads and nuts and seeds and whole grains all through the week, and once a week you have you go to Pizza Hut, is that really bad for your diet? No. And, in the same way as you can have a pizza and McDonald's every night, and once, at the weekend you have a salmon salad, is that really very good? No, not really. So people don't think of things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. That's a really balanced way of looking at things. And I think important. I think we can all beat ourselves up about these things. And I guess it's about trying to build the right sorts of habits and get the right balance. So thank you for sharing. We're sadly close to an end, James. I've really enjoyed this. It's been really insightful and exciting, but you've achieved so much. You've built a category defining company, had a real impact on a lot of lives. You've also now created a fantastic book that I think will help many people. And you've built a business with lots of people, great culture. What has been your personal highlight? What are you most proud of from your career to date?
Just on that, so yeah, whilst I've been involved in building Huel, I really don't like it when I'm thought you've built that, because Julian's the fundamental founder. I've done the nutrition side and I've been instrumental in it for sure. But we've got other people. We've got the other James Master, the CEO, who's been running the business for 8 years now for us, and so many other people across the business as well who have built that business. And everybody's important. I'm just one cog in that bigger machine. I'm just a cog that's been around for one of the longest times. What am I most proud of? I'm proud of you, but that's been me as part of that cog. So I don't like feeling proud of myself. It's just something I don't do. Maybe it's a Gen X trait. If I can be proud of the book, I'm pretty proud I've produced something that I'm happy with on a intellectually honest level that's rigorous. There's about 700 references in that book, whether they're books, podcasts, or scientific papers or whatever. So I'm proud of what I've achieved there. And I'm pleased that at least I think I've tried to stick to my values when I do produce nutrition and sustainable nutrition content online in my socials. People might disagree with me, but nobody's yet given me a challenge on a high rung level. I've had a couple of academics actually criticize a couple of small points within my book, and they've got a fair point. I love that because that's high rung debate, right? That's academia for you. And I get the zealots on social media, having a bash at me with a few things, but I like to think that I've stuck to my principles and can back up everything I say, including the fact that sometimes I get things wrong, right? And that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, well, thank you for sharing. We're sadly at an end. We've got two final wrap up questions, James. This is 40-minute mental. So I have to ask you, if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Oh, I've never been asked that one before. I don't like one single mentors because you've learned from multiple people, different traits. I can't pick an individual. I think Stephen Fry is pretty inspiring as an individual because he look at things with such a rational, objective mindset and just relay it in such a brilliant word. The other question I've been asking is, and I narrated the audiobook, but if I had to be someone else that narrated it, it would definitely be Stephen Fry. No question.
He's got a great voice. Yeah, combining that kind of intellectual rigor with entertainment is that's a real combo, isn't it? That's so true.
Yeah, he's just an amazing guy.
Yeah, totally. And final question, what is one final piece of advice, career or life advice, that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
This phrase, no fucks given, that people say on t-shirts and stuff like that. I hate it. I don't think it's helpful. You need to give a fuck. You need to care what other people think. But my advice would be try and give one level less of a fuck than you think you need to do, because it can hold you back if you care too much what other people think.
It's a great place to leave this. James, it's been a real privilege. Thank you for sharing your story and more about your fantastic book. It's really loads of insights there and really enjoyable conversation. So thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Privileged to be here, James. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40 Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40 Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.